I was 67 years old when I looked at that food stamp card and felt something that wasn't hunger. $43. That was all I had left until the end of the month. My hands trembled, but not from the cold of that autumn morning, nor from the fear of going hungry. I already knew hunger intimately. It and I were old friends. What made me tremble was something else. Inside that crumpled envelope, along with the cardboard, was a piece of paper I had found in the trash 3 days before. A piece of paper stained with coffee, torn at the edges, with handwritten numbers and codes I didn't understand. But something in those scribbles screamed at me, as if each number were a password, a locked door that someone had forgotten to close. And I knew, with that strange certainty that only those who have lost everything can have, that my life was about to change completely. The question was, did I have enough courage to walk through that door? Or would I do what I had always done my whole life, lower my head and accept the fate they had given me? Let me tell you how I got to that point, because this story doesn't begin with $43. It begins much earlier, in the freezing early mornings when I woke up at 4:30, when the city was still a sleeping concrete skeleton. There's nothing inspiring about that. Forget it. It's not that pretty story of overcoming adversity that people like to share on social media. It's dirty. It's heavy. It's invisible. I was invisible. People passed me on the street as if I were part of the landscape, just another lamppost, just another trash can. And perhaps it was precisely this invisibility that saved me. Because when you're invisible, you see things that others don't see. You realize that rich people throw away much more than trash. They throw away secrets. And it was on a rainy Tuesday, behind a mirrored glass corporate building, inside a soaked cardboard box, that I found it. It wasn't just paper. It was information. It was power. I didn't know that yet, of course. At the time, I just thought, this seems important. And I kept it. 3 months before everything fell apart and rebuilt itself, I made a mistake. Or was it luck? To this day, I'm not entirely sure. I had an interview for a cleaning job at an office downtown. I wrote down the wrong address. I went into the wrong building. I got on the wrong elevator. And I ended up sitting in the waiting room of an investment firm, with beige carpet and abstract paintings on the walls. The receptionist didn't even look at me properly. She thought I was someone's mother or the grandmother of some intern. I sat there for 40 minutes waiting, flipping through magazines about the stock market, cryptocurrencies, real estate investment trusts, words that sounded like a foreign language, but one phrase stuck in my head like chewing gum on a shoe. Rich people don't work for money. They make money work for them. It echoed. It never left. And when? Weeks later, I found that piece of paper in the trash. Everything started to connect. It was as if someone had given me the pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was putting together. So let's go back to that envelope. $43. I had 2 options, and both were a shot in the dark. The first, sell that piece of paper. A guy at a thrift store offered me $200 for it. $200. To me, that was almost a month's worth of food, but something held me back, a hoarse voice deep in my mind, or maybe it was just desperation disguised as intuition. I kept the paper, and with the $43 from the food stamp, I did something my neighbors called crazy. My daughter cried on the phone. She yelled that I was throwing food away, but I wasn't throwing it away. I was gambling. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was choosing. And that choice burned, because when you have nothing, every penny is a piece of your soul. And I was surrendering my soul to something I didn't even fully understand. 7 days later, I woke up with a heavy heart. I picked up that old cell phone with the cracked screen I used to fix with duct tape and opened the app. $347. I blinked. I shook my head. I refreshed the page. 347. I had put in 43. Now I had 347 in 1 week, without working, without picking through trash, just waiting. My hands trembled again, but it was different. It wasn't fear. It was power. Something I had never, in 67 years of life, felt. I had control. I had a choice. And it was at that moment that I understood. The secret the rich hide isn't complicated. It's not inaccessible. The secret is so simple it hurts. And if everyone knew, if everyone truly believed, the world would be different. But almost no one believes. Almost no one acts. I could withdraw that money. I could buy food, pay bills, sleep peacefully. But something inside me whispered, "Keep going." And I kept going. Now tell me something. If you found a piece of paper like that in the trash, all crumpled and dirty, would you keep it? Or would you throw it away without even looking at it properly? Leave your answer in the comments below. Before I tell you what happened to those $347 and how they turned into something much bigger than I ever imagined, let me ask you one thing. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like here. Because this story is just beginning, and you need to see how far it goes. I promise that what comes next will show you exactly why the rich hide this secret so fiercely. And believe me, you won't want to miss the moment I discovered that that crumpled piece of paper was just the first piece of a much bigger and much more dangerous puzzle than I could have imagined. Stick with me until the end, because there's a twist that will completely change everything you think you know about money and power. I stopped telling people. I quickly learned that success, even small success, attracts things you don't want around you. Envy disguised as concern, doubts wrapped in advice, requests that come as favors but arrive as demands. So I shut myself off. I kept waking up at 4:30. I kept pushing that cart through the empty streets. I kept picking up trash. But now it was theater, a performance to keep the peace, because nobody could know. Nobody could suspect that at night, when everyone was asleep, I sat in front of that old laptop I bought at a thrift store and studied. Videos, articles, forums full of people who spoke that strange language of numbers and codes. I absorbed everything like a sponge, and the numbers went up. $2,000, $8,500, $23,000. I didn't shout. I didn't celebrate. I just watched, in silence, that empire growing in the shadows of my invisible life. And then I realized something that changed everything. The rich don't hide the secret because it's difficult. They keep it secret because it's too simple. So simple that if everyone knew, the game would be over. And they can't let the game end. But the universe has a cruel way of testing us just when we think we're in control. $127,000. That was the number on the screen when the phone rang. It was my daughter. Her voice was broken, in that way only a mother recognizes. My granddaughter. My 6-year-old granddaughter. Rare disease. Urgent surgery. $15,000. I had the money. For the first time in my miserable life, I had the money. But if I took it now, I would break the cycle. I knew that. It was like uprooting a plant just when it's about to bear fruit. I stood there, holding the phone in one hand and my chest in the other, because it felt like my heart was going to explode. I looked at the ceiling. I took a deep breath, and I made the most painful decision of my life. I took the $15,000. I saved my granddaughter, and I watched my empire crumble. I was back to almost square one, but something had changed inside me. I wasn't learning anymore. I was dominating, and 3 months later, what I had before withdrawing that money, I recovered in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's when I understood. The secret wasn't just winning. It was knowing how to lose and come back stronger. The following months were a silent roller coaster. I climbed. I fell. I climbed again. Each fall taught me something no book teaches. Each rise gave me a confidence I'd never had in my life. But the strange thing is, on the outside, nothing changed. I remained the same old garbage collector. People continued to look away when I passed by. They continued to treat me as if I were nothing. And perhaps that's what kept me sane. Because when you get rich quick, you either go crazy with excitement or you go crazy with fear of losing everything. But I had nothing to lose. Or rather, I had already lost everything before. So I wasn't afraid. And without fear, you make decisions that other people would never make. Risky decisions, smart decisions, decisions that transform $43 into something much bigger. But there was one detail I hadn't yet realized. The higher I climbed, the more alone I became. Not because people abandoned me, but because I chose silence. And silence, when it becomes a habit, becomes a prison. The day finally arrived. I woke up with the sun streaming through the cracked window of my rented little room. I grabbed my phone. $1.3 million. I read it again. 1.3 million. I sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in 40 years, I cried. It wasn't sadness. It was relief, disbelief, fierce, wild gratitude. I didn't have to wake up at 4 in the morning anymore. I didn't have to carry smelly bags anymore. I didn't have to hang my head anymore. But you know what I did? I put on my old coat, grabbed the cart, and went out into the street. One last time. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remember where I came from, what it cost, the smell of the empty streets, the biting cold, the painful loneliness. Because if I forgot all that, I would forget myself, and money without memory is worthless. I pushed the cart slowly, looking at every corner, every alley, every trash can. And when I got home, I left the cart on the sidewalk. Someone would pick it up. Someone was going to need it. And me? I could finally breathe. But the story doesn't end with $1 million. It was barely beginning. Because one thing is to earn money. Another thing is to know what to do with it. And I discovered that money in the hands of someone who has been poor works differently. You don't spend it for the sake of spending it. You invest it instinctively. You protect it because of trauma. And you multiply it because you never want to go back. So that's what I did. I bought small properties. I invested in businesses that nobody looked at. I financed startups run by people as desperate as I was. And each right decision took me to another level. Until one day, I looked at my bank statement and saw $50 million. 50. But nobody knows my name. I don't give interviews. I don't post on social media. I don't appear on lists of rich people. I live simply. But behind the scenes, I move mountains. And it all started with a crumpled piece of paper I found in the trash. You must be wondering, what was on that piece of paper? Everyone asks. The few people who know my story are obsessed with that answer, as if the paper were magic, as if it held the secret of the universe scribbled in smudged blue ink. But the truth is, the paper wasn't anything out of this world. They were access codes, passwords, investment strategies that someone hastily wrote down and threw away. Probably an intern who got fired, or a drunk executive who printed something he shouldn't have. It doesn't matter. What matters is that that paper gave me a window, a crack through which I could peek into the world of the rich. And when you peek, you learn, you copy, you adapt. And that's exactly what I did. I copied the strategies. I adapted them to my size, to my pace. And it worked. But it wasn't the paper that made me rich. It was the courage to use what I learned. Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. And I wasn't having fun. I was surviving. And survival transforms knowledge into power. The funny thing is, when you start to climb the ladder, people change. Not you. They do. My daughter, who cried when she found out I'd thrown away $43, now called me every week. At first, it was genuine concern. Then it turned into curiosity. And in the end, it turned into self-interest. She never asked for money directly, but the hints became increasingly forceful. Mom, did you see the price of the girls' school? Mom, the car broke down again. Mom, could you help me just this once? And I helped. Of course I helped. But every time I transferred money, I felt a strange emptiness, because it wasn't gratitude I received in return. It was expectation, as if I had become a bank, an emotional ATM. And I realized that when you have money, you lose something precious, the certainty of who truly loves you. Because everyone loves someone who can solve their problems, but who loves someone who has nothing? That's the question I could no longer answer. So I did. Something radical. I stopped helping. I simply stopped. I didn't warn her. I didn't explain. I just stopped. The calls became less frequent. The visits disappeared. And at first, it broke me. Because I thought, I raised this girl. I gave her everything I had, which was almost nothing, but it was everything. But with time, I understood. I didn't lose my daughter. I gained clarity. And clarity, when you're building something great, is worth more than any relationship based on convenience. Because what I was building wasn't just wealth, it was a legacy. It was proof that someone like me, invisible, disposable, could rewrite their own destiny. And nobody could take that away from me. Not her, not anyone. But there are nights when I look at the ceiling and ask myself, was it worth it? Trading affection for autonomy? Trading family for freedom? And the answer still hasn't come. Maybe it never will. Meanwhile, I kept investing, but now in a different way. I wasn't chasing quick money anymore. I was building silent empires. I bought properties that nobody wanted, old buildings in forgotten neighborhoods, and I waited. Because I learned something that the rich know, and the poor don't. Patience is the most profitable investment there is. I bought a building for $60,000. I waited 3 years. I sold it for $220,000. I bought 5 small apartments. I rented them out. I used the rent to buy more. And so the cycle turned. Slowly, silently, but relentlessly. People think getting rich is a matter of luck, but it's not. It's a matter of repetition, of doing the right thing 1,000 times in a row, even when it seems like it's not working, even when it hurts, even when you're alone in a rented room, with no one to celebrate with you. And I celebrated alone, always alone, until one day I received a strange call, an unknown number, a firm, almost robotic male voice. "Madam, we know who you are, we know what you have, and we want to talk." My heart stopped. How could they know who I am? I don't exist. I don't appear anywhere. I don't have social media. I don't give interviews. I'm a financial ghost. But it seems ghosts leave traces, and someone had followed mine. The voice continued. "Don't worry. We don't want to harm you. We want to include you." "Include you in what?" I asked. And the answer was as simple as it was terrifying. "In the real game." I hung up the phone. I stood there for hours. The real game. What did that mean? And more importantly, did I want to play? What if the real test wasn't about making money, but knowing when to stop accumulating and start living? Comment below. If you had 50 million today, what would be the first thing you would do? Spend it, invest it, or hide it? I spent 3 days without sleeping properly after that call. Every noise in the street made me jump. Every car that stopped in front of the building made me tense. I had spent my whole life being invisible. And suddenly, someone could see me. Someone knew. And worse, someone wanted something from me. I kept wondering if I had been stupid, if I had left digital traces, if I had trusted the wrong person. But I didn't trust anyone. That was the problem. Or the solution. I don't know anymore. The phone rang again. Same voice. This time, more direct. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the offer is off the table, and you go back to being invisible, but not in the way you want." The call dropped. 48 hours. To decide what? I didn't even know what they were offering. I didn't even know who they were. But the threat was clear. They could erase me or expose me, and either option would destroy me. I did something I'd never done before. I sought help, not from a lawyer, not from the police, but from someone who understood the underworld of investing. A guy I met on an online forum. He used a pseudonym. So did I. We exchanged strategies, information, sometimes a warning about a trap in the market. He was good, very good, and he seemed honest as much as possible. I sent a message. "I need to talk. Urgent." The reply came in seconds. "Coffee tomorrow. Address in private." When I arrived at the place, it was a tiny, almost empty coffee shop, smelling of toasted bread and with old wooden furniture. He was sitting in the back, about 50 years old, gray beard, tired eyes. He didn't smile. He just nodded. I sat down, and I told him everything. He listened in silence, stirring a cup of coffee he'd never drunk. When I finished, he sighed deeply. "You're on their radar." "Whose radar?" "The real power brokers," he explained. "There's a game within the game. The stock market we see, the investments everyone talks about, that's just the surface, the shop window. But underneath, there's another layer. People who move billions without showing their faces. Secret funds, financial cartels, people who decide who goes up and who goes down. And when someone like me, out of nowhere, starts rising too fast without being connected to anyone, they notice. Because it's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" I asked. "Dangerous because you prove that the system can be beaten, and they can't let that become an example." I felt my stomach churn. "So what do I do?" He finally drank his coffee. "Cold. You have 3 options. Accept their invitation and become part of the system. Refuse and disappear for good. Vanish with the money and never invest again. Or," he stopped, "or what? Or you? Play against them. But if you choose that, there's no going back, and you'll probably lose everything." I left that coffee shop with more questions than answers. I went back home. I locked the door. I sat on the floor. And I thought about the girl I was, the woman I've become, the decades pushing garbage carts, the contempt in people's eyes, the hunger, the cold, the crumpled paper, the $43. I thought about everything I had achieved, and everything I could lose. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to bow down. Not again. I'd spent my whole life bowing my head, accepting, conforming. And when I finally raised my head, when I finally took what was rightfully mine, someone wanted to push me back down? No, not this time. I picked up the phone. I waited for the call, and when it came, I was ready. So? The voice asked. I accept. Silence on the other end. Great choice. Someone will pick you up tomorrow at 7 o'clock tonight. Wear something discreet. And it hung up. I looked at the clock. 22 hours to go. 22 hours to regret it, or to prepare myself. I spent the whole day organizing everything. I transferred some of the money to different accounts. I hid information. I left written instructions in a sealed envelope with my granddaughter's name on it. If something went wrong, she would know what to do. I took a shower. I put on simple black pants and a gray blouse. Nothing flashy. At 7 o'clock sharp, a black van stopped in front of the building. Tinted windows, no visible license plate. The side door opened. A man in a suit waved. I took a deep breath, and I got in. The interior was luxurious, genuine leather, low lighting. But what caught my attention was the silence. Nobody spoke during the entire ride. 20 minutes later, we stopped in front of a building I had never seen before. Glass, steel, imposing. I got in. I was taken to an elevator that had no buttons, just a fingerprint reader. The man touched it with his thumb. The doors closed, and we started to go up. But something was wrong. The feeling was strange, as if we were going down, not up. When the elevator doors opened, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. It wasn't an office. It wasn't meeting rooms with mahogany desks and expensive paintings. It was a huge, circular hall with a ceiling so high I could barely see where it ended. The walls were dark glass, and on the other side, water. Lots of water. As if we were inside a giant aquarium, only inverted. Enormous fish swam slowly, their shadows gliding across the walls like liquid ghosts. In the center of the hall, a round table, and around it, 7 people, all with their backs to me. No one turned when I entered. The man in the suit guided me to an empty chair, the 8th chair. I sat down. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone there could hear it, but no one moved, until a voice, deep and feminine, echoed, "Welcome to the circle." It didn't come from any of the people. It came from all sides at once, as if the walls were speaking. You were chosen not for what you have, but for what you've done. Few manage to rise alone. Even fewer manage to remain invisible while they rise. The voice paused. I felt they were evaluating me. But invisibility has an expiration date, and yours has run out. One of the figures finally turned around. An older man, perhaps 70 years old, impeccable white hair, gray suit. He didn't smile. He just looked at me with that expression powerful people have. That look that says, "I know things you'll never know." "What do you know about control?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. I was trying to understand the question. Control of what? Of myself? Of money? Of the world? He continued. Control is the only thing that separates the rich from the very rich. Anyone can make money, but few know how to control it, and even fewer know how to control others. He leaned forward. You have control over yourself. That's rare. But do you want control over more? I took a deep breath. It depends on the price. A low laugh echoed through the room. It wasn't mockery. It was approval. Another figure turned. A woman in her early 40s, short hair, sharp eyes. The price is simple. Loyalty. You come in, you don't leave. You play with us, you play forever. There are no ex-members of the circle, only active members, or dead ones. The silence that followed was heavy. Dead. She said dead. I should have been scared. I should have gotten up and run. But something strange happened. I smiled. Not a happy smile, a tired smile, because I realized I was already dead before, dead while alive, invisible, disposable. And now, for the first time, someone was offering me not only life, but power. What do you want from me? I asked. The voice returned. We want you to do what you already do, but on a larger scale, with our resources, our connections, our protection. It seemed too good to be true. And when something seems too good to be true, it's usually a trap. And in return, the white-haired man smiled for the first time. a thin, almost imperceptible smile. In return, you give us 10% of everything you earn from now on, and your absolute discretion. The circle doesn't officially exist. It never has. You've never been here, and nothing that happens here can be revealed, ever. 10%. It seemed like little, but I knew it wasn't about percentage. It was about belonging. It was about joining. A club that most people don't even know exists. Can I think about it? The short-haired woman laughed. You already thought about it. That's why you agreed to come. Now you just have to sign. A piece of paper appeared in front of me. Where it came from, I don't know. It simply appeared, without words, just a dotted line, and a gold pen beside it. I looked at the paper, at the pen, and at the 7 figures watching me. I picked up the pen, but before signing, I asked one last question. If I refuse now, what happens? The silence returned, heavier, longer, until the voice answered. You go back to your life, but not as it was, as it will be. Your investments will start to fail. Your accounts will be investigated, your tracks erased. In 6 months, you'll be back picking up trash, but this time, without hope. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a threat, clear, direct. They could destroy me, and they would, unless I joined them. I looked at the pen, at the dotted line, and I thought about the girl I was, the trash collector I still was, deep down, and the woman I could become. I touched the tip of the pen to the paper. My hand trembled, but not from fear, from anger, because in the end, I had no choice. Or did I? Do we always have a choice? Or do we only think we do? I signed. The ink was black, but when I wrote my name, it glowed for a second, electric blue, as if the paper had a life of its own. Then it went back to normal, black, dead. I put the pen down on the table. No one applauded, no one smiled. They just nodded one by one, as if I had just passed a silent test. The voice echoed again. Officially welcome. From now on, you will have access to information that moves countries, to decisions that change markets. But remember, with great power comes great silence. The white-haired man stood up. You will receive instructions soon. Your first task will be simple, a loyalty test. He walked to the glass wall, watching a shark glide slowly. Everyone here has been through this, and everyone has paid the price of admission. Now it's your turn. Price of admission. I hadn't asked what it was, and I realized, too late, that I should have asked. The meeting ended as quickly as it began. I was taken back to the elevator, back to the van, back home. When I arrived, it was dawn. I sat on the bed and looked at my hands. They didn't seem different, but I knew I was different. I had crossed an invisible line. I had entered a world with no way out. And the worst part of me was excited, anxious, curious, because after spending my whole life being nobody, now I was somebody, someone they feared enough to want to control. 2 days later, I received a message, just an address and a time, nothing else. I went. It was an ordinary office building in a busy area. I went in. I went up to the 12th floor. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. Inside, a man, 30-something, expensive suit, sweating. He saw me and turned pale. Are you her? I didn't answer. I just looked. He swallowed hard. They sent you? I remained silent. He started talking fast, desperate. I was going to pay. I swear I was. I just need more time. Just 1 more month. I can do it. I swear. I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know what I should do. But I understood one thing. I was there to be the message, not to deliver the message. To be. I walked towards him. Slowly. He backed up until he was against the wall. Please, I have a family. I have children. I stopped in front of him. I looked him in the eyes, and I said the only thing that came to my mind. You have 48 hours. I left. I went down the stairs. When I got to the street, I was trembling. Not from fear, from adrenaline. I had just threatened someone, without even knowing why, without even knowing what he owed. But the feeling of power was addictive, dangerously addictive. That night, I received another message. First task complete. Welcome, really. And along with it, a transfer. $500,000. Just for showing up. Just for having scared someone. In the following months, the tasks became more complex, more sinister. I was used as an intermediary, like a ghost. I appeared in places, delivered messages, collected information. I never did anything illegal directly, but I knew I was facilitating illegal things: money laundering, market manipulation, corruption. And the worst part? I was getting good at it. Very good. Because nobody suspects an old woman. Nobody imagines that that gray-haired lady sitting in the cafe is listening to the conversation at the next table and recording everything on a device hidden in her purse. Invisibility had become my greatest weapon. Again. But this time, I controlled when to appear and when to disappear. The money kept rising. 50 million became 70, 70 became 90. But each new cent came with a stain, with a memory, with a frightened face. And I began to realize I was no longer building an empire. I was building a prison of gold, but it was still a prison. Until one day, I went back to that coffee shop where I found the man with the gray beard. He was there, same table, same cup of cold coffee. I sat across from him uninvited. He looked at me with those tired eyes. Regretful? He asked. I don't know yet. He gave a half smile. When you know, it will be too late. Why didn't you warn me better? He sighed. Because you wouldn't have. Believed me. Nobody believes until they're inside. We were silent, until he said something that sent shivers down my spine. You know they're testing you, right? Testing you how? To see how far you'll go, how much you'll sell yourself. And when they discover your limit, they'll use you until you break, or discard you before. I stood up. He grabbed my wrist, not forcefully, but urgently. There's still time. To leave, to disappear. For real this time. I looked at him, and for the first time in months, I felt real fear. What if the price of freedom meant giving up everything you've achieved? Comment below. Would you give up wealth to reclaim your soul? Or would you try to keep both? I left that coffee shop with my head spinning, leaving, disappearing. It seemed simple when he said it, but it wasn't, because leaving meant abandoning everything: the 90 million, the power, the feeling of being someone. And where would I go? Go back to collecting garbage? Pretend none of this happened? I had crossed the river. You can't swim back when the current has already taken you too far. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and seeds, when watered with fear, grow fast. I started observing everything more closely, the tasks they gave me, the people I met, the patterns, and I realized something disturbing. All the tasks had one thing in common. They compromised me. Each one pushed me a little deeper, as if they were building a dossier against me. Evidence, recordings, witnesses. If I tried to leave, if I turned against them, I would be destroyed, not by violence, but by exposure. They would turn me into the villain, and I would have no way to defend myself, because everything was true. One night, I woke up to my phone vibrating. 3 a.m. A message. Urgent task. Car will pick you up in 15 minutes. My heart raced. Late-night tasks were never good. I threw on whatever I could find. I went downstairs. The van was already there. I got in. This time, it wasn't the man in the suit. It was the woman with short hair, the one from the circle. She didn't look at me. She just said, "Today you'll learn your limits." My stomach churned. We drove for almost an hour. We stopped at an abandoned warehouse. There was no light, only the moonlight coming through the broken windows. We got out. We went back in. And inside, tied to a chair, was a man. Swollen face, dried blood at the corner of his mouth. He was conscious, but unwell. The woman turned to me. He stole from the circle, 3 million. He thinks he can disappear and start over. She pulled a gun from her waist and handed it to me. Cold, heavy, real. Your limit is here. I looked at the gun, at the man, at her. I'm not a murderer. She smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Not yet. My hand trembled so much I almost dropped the gun. The man looked at me. In his eyes, I saw what I used to be: despair, fear, impotence, and something inside me broke. No, I whispered. No what? She asked, still smiling. I'm not going to do it. The smile faded. So you know what happens, right? I knew. I would become the next person tied to a chair. But I couldn't. I couldn't pull the trigger. I held the gun back to her. Kill me if you want, but I'm not going to. Silence, long, suffocating, until she took the gun back and fired a shot, not at me, at the man. He fell forward, still tied to the chair, blood spreading slowly across the concrete floor. I felt my legs weaken. She put the gun away. You failed the test, but it wasn't the test you thought it would be. She walked to the door. She stopped. She turned to me. The test wasn't to see if you would kill. It was to see if you would refuse. Welcome to the second level. And she left me there, alone, with a body, with blood, with the certainty that I had just entered an even deeper hell. Because they didn't want murderers. They wanted people with a conscience. Because people with a conscience suffer more, and people who suffer are easier to control. I fell to my knees, and finally, after months, I cried, not from relief, from horror, from what I had become, from what I could still become. When I got home, the sun was rising. I sat on the bed. I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She had my face, but she didn't have my soul. That had been stolen, or sold. I didn't know anymore. I spent weeks in shock. The tasks continued, but now they were different, more psychological, more cruel. They made me choose between two people. Which one would lose everything? Which one would be spared? As if I were God, as if I had the right. And the worst part? I chose. Because if I didn't choose, both would lose. So I chose the lesser of two evils, and I carried the weight, every face, every name, every life destroyed by my decision. I was drowning, but not in water, in guilt, in blood that wasn't mine, but that stained my hands all the same. Until one day, I received a call. It wasn't the robotic voice. It wasn't the woman with short hair. It was my daughter. "Mom, are you okay? I haven't seen you in months." Her voice was strange, worried, genuine, and I realized she didn't know anything. Nobody knew. I was still invisible, but this time, even to myself. I arranged to have lunch with her, at a simple restaurant, far from everything. She arrived with her granddaughter, my little granddaughter, now 7 years old, smiling, running, innocent, and when she hugged me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure love, without calculation, without self-interest, without burden. We sat, we talked, I laughed. For the first time in months, I truly laughed, and it was there, looking at that child, drawing on a paper napkin, that I made the most important decision of my life. I was going to leave. It didn't matter the cost. It didn't matter the risk, because if I continued, I would lose the only thing that still mattered, my humanity. We finished lunch. I said, "Goodbye." And when I got in the car, I did something I had never done before. I called the man with the gray beard. "You said there was still time. Is there still time?" Silence. Then, "Yes, but it will hurt, a lot. It doesn't matter. Help me." He sighed. "I'll meet you tomorrow, same coffee shop, and bring everything important you have, because after that, you're not coming back." I spent the entire night organizing everything. Documents, passwords, transfers. I had 92 million spread across 17 different accounts. I needed to consolidate. I needed to hide. But hide from whom? The circle. They had eyes everywhere. Systems, hackers, informants. If I simply transferred everything, they would know, and they would find me. So I did something different. I divided the money into tiny parts. 100 accounts, 200, each with small amounts, insignificant, nothing that would attract attention. And I started converting. Crypto, digital gold, physical assets, anything that could be moved without leaving an obvious trace. It took 6 hours. When I finished, the sun was already shining through the window. I had managed to hide almost everything. Almost. I left 5 million in a traceable account. Bait. If they looked for it, they would find it, and they would think that was all. At least that was the plan. I grabbed an old backpack. I put only the essentials inside. Fake documents I bought on an obscure forum. Cash, a clean cell phone, and a picture of my granddaughter, just one, to remind me why I was doing this. I arrived at the coffee shop before him. I sat at the same table. I ordered a coffee that I didn't drink. He appeared 10 minutes later, without smiling, without greeting me. He just sat down and placed a brown envelope on the table. "New ID, clean passport, history created. You are now Margaret Torres, retired teacher, widow, no children." I opened the envelope. I looked at the photo. It was my face, but the name was someone else's. And my daughter? My granddaughter? He shook his head. "You can't have contact. ever again. If you do, they'll track you down and find you. And when they find you, they won't kill you. They'll use your family against you. I felt a tightness in my chest. Never again. Those words weighed like lead. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked. I looked at the photo of my granddaughter inside the backpack, and I nodded. Yes, he sighed. Then finish your coffee and walk out that door. There's a car waiting. Blue license plate. Get in. And don't look back. Literally. I got up. My leg was trembling, but I walked. I went through the door. I saw the car. Blue license plate. I got in. The driver didn't say anything. He just accelerated. We drove for hours. We changed cars 3 times, each time in a different place. Parking lot, gas station, deserted street, until we finally stopped at a small airport. It wasn't the main one. It was one of those regional ones. Few flights, few people. The driver handed me a ticket. Flight leaves in 40 minutes. Destination not specified. You'll only know when you board the plane. I took the ticket. I got out of the car, and I went into the airport. I went through security. I boarded. I sat by the window, and only when the plane took off did I breathe, deeply, long, as if it were the first time. I looked out the window. The city was getting smaller and smaller, and along with it, my whole life, everything I built, everything I lived, everything I lost. I closed my eyes, and I slept, for the first time in months, without nightmares. I woke up to the flight attendant tapping my shoulder. "Ma'am, we've arrived." I looked out the window. It was a small place, mountains in the distance, clear sky, air that felt lighter. I got off, I grabbed my backpack, and I left the airport. No one was waiting for me. No plan, no direction, just freedom and fear, because freedom without direction is almost as frightening as prison with comfort. I walked to a nearby town. I found a cheap hotel. I paid in cash. I went up to the room. I locked the door, and finally, I let it all out. I cried. I screamed into my pillow. I punched the wall, because I had gained my freedom, but I had lost my family, my identity, my history. I was Margaret now, and Margaret had no past, no memories, no one. She was a ghost, again, but this time, by choice, and choices hurt more than destiny. In the first few days, I just walked around, explored the city, bought food, returned to the hotel, and repeated the cycle, as if I were on autopilot. My mind was still in that room with my body, in that warehouse, in those impossible choices. I had escaped the circle, but the circle still lived inside me, until one afternoon, sitting on a park bench, a child approached. She must have been about 5 years old, messy hair, toothless smile. "Are you sad?" she asked. I looked at her, and I lied. "No, just tired. My grandma gets tired too." But then, I give her a hug, and she feels better. Before I could answer, she hugged me, tightly. In that way, only children hug, without fear, without calculation, just affection. And something inside me broke, again. But this time, in a good way, as if a piece of my humanity, which I thought I had lost, was still there, hidden, but alive. The child's mother came running, apologizing, but I said everything was fine, more than fine. And that night, I returned to the hotel with a different feeling, hope. Small, fragile, but real. Maybe I could rebuild, not the life I had, but a new one, a life without stains, without blood, without guilt, a simple life, invisible, again, but this time, invisible in the right way. I picked up my clean phone, opened a browser, and typed, "How to start over after losing everything." Hundreds of results, stories of people who had fallen and gotten up, and fallen again, and gotten up again. And I realized I wasn't unique, I wasn't special, I was just another one. And maybe that's exactly what I needed to be, another one, not an exception, not a legend, just someone trying to live, one day at a time. 3 months passed. Margaret Torres, a retired teacher, rented a simple little house on the outskirts of the city. 2 windows, 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen. But it was mine, really mine. No contracts with overly fake names. No fear of knocks on the door. I started working at a local library. They paid almost nothing, but I didn't need almost anything. I had enough saved up to live 100 years without luxury. And luxury was the last thing I wanted. I organized books. I helped children with their homework. I talked to elderly people who went there just to avoid being alone. And for the first time in decades, I felt useful in a way that didn't hurt anyone. In a clean way. Simple, human. But there's something about dark pasts. They don't stay buried forever, even when you dig deep, even when you pray they do. It was a rainy Thursday. I was organizing the biography section when I felt it, that feeling of being watched. I turned slowly, and there she was, the woman with short hair, sitting at a reading table, leafing through a magazine, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My heart stopped, literally stopped for a second. She looked up, saw me, and smiled. That thin smile, dangerous. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. When I opened them, she was still there. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. She stood up, walked towards me, slowly, like a predator in no hurry, stopped a few inches away, and whispered, "Margaret Torres, what a pretty name." My mouth went dry. "What do you want?" She tilted her head. "It's not what I want. It's what they want." "Who are they?" "You know who." She placed a card in my hand. Black. Nothing written on it. Just a number in gold relief. "Call. Tonight. 8 o'clock. Or we'll call your daughter and tell her everything." She left, without haste, without looking back. I stood there, holding that card as if it were poison. They found me. Of course they found me. I was naive to think I could simply disappear. People like them don't let anyone go. You just change cages. I went home early. I locked the door, I closed the curtains, and I looked at the clock. 5 o'clock. 3 hours until the call. 3 hours to decide whether to answer or run away again. But where to? I was already at the end of the world. I had nowhere else to run. I sat on the kitchen floor, and I thought, if I called, what did they want? To bring me back? To use me again? Or just to destroy me, slowly, as a warning to anyone else who tried to leave? And if I didn't call, my daughter would pay, my granddaughter would pay, and I couldn't let that happen. Not after everything. So at 8 o'clock sharp, I called. The voice that answered wasn't the woman's. It wasn't the white-haired man's. It was new, young, masculine, too calm. "Margaret, or should I call you by your real name?" I didn't answer. He continued. "Do you think you can leave? That you can simply start over? That you can forget?" "I haven't forgotten. I just wanted to live." He laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was almost sad. "Live. Interesting. Because you lived well while you were with us. Millions. Power. Respect. Fear. Guilt. Blood." I finished. Silence. Then, "Fair enough. But you signed. And signatures, in our world, are eternal. What do you want?" He sighed. "One last task. Do it, and you're free. Truly. No persecution. No threats. You and your family. Untouchable. And if I refuse, you won't refuse. Because the task is simple. And because you know what happens if you refuse." My hand trembled. "What task?" "Tomorrow. Noon. Central Square. A man will sit on the bench next to yours. You will hand him an envelope. That's all. 30 seconds. And it's over." It seemed too simple. And things that are too simple always hide complexity. What's in the envelope? Nothing that will compromise you. Nothing that will bind you. Just information. Information about what? That doesn't matter. What matters is, do you do it or not? I closed my eyes. I thought of my granddaughter, of that child's hug in the square, of the simple life I had built, and of the life I would lose if I refused. "I'll do it." "Great. The envelope will be under your door tomorrow morning." "And Margaret?" "What?" "Don't try to open it. Don't try to look. Just hand it over and forget about it." The call dropped. I stood there, holding the phone, feeling the weight of the world returning to my shoulders. I had run away. I had hidden. I had started over. But the past doesn't care about new beginnings. It always comes back. It always collects. And it always wins. The next morning the envelope was there, thin, white, sealed with red wax. I picked it up. It was lighter than I expected, almost empty. I put it in my bag, and I went. The square was full. Children playing, couples walking. Normal. People living normal lives. I sat on the designated bench, noon sharp. 2 minutes later, a man sat next to me. Gray suit, dark glasses. He didn't look at me. He just said, "Envelope." I took it out of my bag. I handed it to him. He took it. He stood up, and he left. 30 seconds. Exactly as they said. I stood up. My legs were shaky. I walked to the bus stop. I got on the first one that came, and only when I sat down did I realize there was a woman looking at me. On the other side of the bus, a fixed gaze, intense. She stood up, walked over to me, sat down beside me, and whispered, "You just killed 12 people." My blood froze. What if a single gesture changed everything, but you only found out too late? Comment below. Would you bear the weight of a choice that seemed innocent, but destroyed lives? I looked at the woman. She was young, maybe 30, hair tied back, hard expression. "What are you talking about?" My voice came out weaker than I wanted. She pulled a cell phone from her pocket, showed me a news article. The headline screamed, "Explosion in corporate building leaves 12 dead." My breath caught in my throat. That envelope had the access codes to the building's security system. You handed over the key. They got in, they planted the bomb, and they got out. All thanks to you. I felt the world spin. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. She put the phone away. Nobody ever knows. That's how it works. They use you. And when it goes wrong, you're to blame. You have two choices now. Live carrying this for the rest of your life, or do something about it. Something like what? She stood up. The bus stopped. She got off. But before leaving, she turned around. "You know where to find me when you decide." And she disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, paralyzed, with that news burning in my mind. 12 people, 12 families destroyed because of an envelope I handed over. Without asking, without questioning, just obeying. I went home in a trance. I locked the door. I sat on the floor, and I screamed, loudly, until my throat hurt, until I had no voice left, because the woman was right. I was guilty, not directly, but guilty. And there was no going back. There was no fixing it. Those 12 people were dead, and I had helped. I spent 2 days locked in my house, without eating, without sleeping properly, just thinking about everything I had done, all the choices that had brought me there. And I realized something terrible. I had spent my whole life being used, first by poverty, then by the circle. And now, even far away, they still used me. I had never been free, not even when I thought I was. On the 3rd day, I left home. I went back to the square. I sat on the same bench, and I waited. I didn't know if she would come, but I had to try, because if I did nothing, if I just accepted it and moved on, I wouldn't be any different from them. I would be an accomplice, forever. 2 hours later, she appeared. She sat beside me without saying anything. We were silent for a while, until I asked, "Who are you?" She looked ahead. Someone who was also used, and who decided to fight. Fight how? By exposing, documenting, destroying them from the inside. She turned to me. "I work with a group. We track the circle, collect evidence, and when the time comes, we hand everything over to the right authorities." Right authorities? The circle has people everywhere. Police, government, justice. I know. That's why it takes so long. That's why it's dangerous. But it's the only way. I looked at her, and I saw something in her eyes that I recognized. Determination born of pain. She had lost something, or someone, just like me. "What do you need from me?" She smiled, for the first time, a tired but real smile. "Access. You've been inside. You know codes, systems, people, names. You're the missing piece." She took me to a small apartment on the other side of town. Walls covered in photos, documents, lines connecting everything like a crime map. In the center, a photo of the short-haired woman, the white-haired man, and other people I didn't know. "How many of you are there?" I asked. 6. There were 10 of us. 4 were eliminated. My stomach churned. "And you think I can make a difference?" She turned to me. "You're the only one who got out alive and still has mental access to the information. The others either died or broke down. You're here, standing, still fighting, even without knowing it." I spent the next few weeks immersed in that world, drawing maps, remembering faces, names, transactions, places. Every detail hurt, because it forced me to relive it. But I kept going, because I needed to, because 12 people deserved justice, because maybe, just maybe, I could redeem myself. Not completely, but enough to look in the mirror again. Until one day, the group's leader arrived. A tall man, a scar on his face, a hoarse voice. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "You know that when this blows up, You'll be exposed too, right? I know. You could go to jail. Even as a victim, you also carried out the execution. You also made choices. I know. He nodded. I just wanted to make sure you understand the price. I understand. And I accept it. Because in the end, it wasn't about me. It was about preventing other people from being used, hurt, killed. It took us 6 months to put together the complete case. Irrefutable evidence, recordings, documents, witnesses. And when we finally delivered everything, it was like unleashing a dragon on a straw town. The media exploded. Arrests began. The Circle tried to defend itself, but it was too late. The web was being dismantled, thread by thread. And me? I waited, because I knew my time would come too. And it came. I was called to testify. I told everything, without omitting anything, without lying. I took responsibility for my part, my guilt, my blood on my hands. The prosecutor looked at me and said, "You will be prosecuted, but your cooperation will be considered." I nodded. I understand. I left that room knowing that my freedom had an expiration date. But strangely, for the first time, I felt free, truly free, because I had no more secrets. I had no more masks. I was who I was, with all the stains, with all the weight, but it was real. I was sentenced to 5 years, with the possibility of reduction for good behavior. I accepted, and in my cell at night, looking at the cracked ceiling, I thought, was it worth it? And the answer is yes, because I prefer to carry admitted guilt than to live free with lies. I prefer to pay for what I did than to pretend it didn't happen. And when I get out, if I get out, I will look for my daughter, my granddaughter, and I will tell them everything, because they deserve the truth, even if it hurts, even if they hate me. Truth is always worth more than comfort. Look, if you've made it this far to the end of this whole story, I wanted to tell you one thing. Thank you, truly, because it's not easy to follow a journey like this, full of ups and downs, difficult choices and consequences that weigh heavily. And if this story touched you in any way, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, leave a comment below writing, "I'm with you until the end," just so I know you were really with me on this whole journey. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. Because I bring stories like this, which aren't about perfect endings, but about real endings, about people who make mistakes, who fall, who get up, who try again. And if you liked this format, this way of telling the story, your like helps me a lot, seriously. It's not just a number. It's a way for you to tell me that it was worth the work of bringing this to you. And look, there's a video right here that talks precisely about how the decisions we make, even the small ones, can change everything. Click and continue watching it. I promise it's worth it. Hugs, and until the next story.